All right, welcome to the e-commerce logistic Asia Summit. My name is Max Henry from the Global Supply Chain Council. So this is a time where we are doing our panel discussion with different speakers and panelists that we've been inviting for today's event. So just to explain to you the format, this is going to be an interactive discussion between all of us on different topics that we have prepared. This is also a chance for you to ask questions, push any topics that you want using the Q&A tab located on the right side of the screen. And you can do that at any time while we speak. We have a couple of topics that we have prepared. But again, we will give you priority and give you a chance to have your questions answered as fast as they come to us. You can also, if you want to interact directly with our panelists, you can click on the raise hand button, which is located at the bottom of the screen. And this way you can switch on your microphone or your webcam, and you can then ask your question directly to us without typing it. So this is also a chance for you to interact directly with us during the event. You also have emojis and reactions at the bottom. So if there's certain things that you like or you don't like, just let us know and we'll watch them as they come as well. So without further ado, I'd like to let our panelists introduce themselves first. So maybe it's time with you, Andre. Go ahead.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Max. So my name is Andre. I've been in Asia since 2012. My career here started with Lazada, one of the early guys. So I think over the last few years, I've spent with CP Group in Thailand under True to help them enabling the e-commerce channels for the retailers. So from wholesale to Q-commerce with 7-Eleven and others. And looking forward to the discussion today. Very interesting people on the panel.
Thank you. Thanks, Andre. Okay, next is Thomas. Hi, Thomas.
Hi, thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. My name's Thomas Harris. I've been in Asia and in logistics for over 15 years now. I've actually been based in Ho Chi Minh for the past 10. And I've been working in e-commerce for the past 6 years. And currently I'm the VP of Fulfillment and After Sales for Tiki.vn here in Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam.
Okay, great. Benjamin, hi, welcome.
Hello, sorry, I think there was a bit of a connection problem. So my name is Benjamin. Hi everyone, nice to meet all of you. So I came from a supply chain and logistic background. So I spent 10 years in a shipping industry. After that, moving to procurement in various industries in manufacturing, through chemicals, industrial. And currently I'm the global category lead for logistics in Amway. And I look after procurement for warehousing, transportation, inbound logistics, freight forwarding, and last mile.
Thank you. Great. All right. Thank you. And the next is Sobit. Hello, Sobit.
Hey, Max. Thanks for having me here. So just a brief introduction. I've been there in the industry of e-commerce for the last about 13 years. I think that's where a major change across the industry happened. And currently I'm in Kupang, where I'm heading the control tower function in here.
So okay, great.
Thanks.
Okay, and last but not least, Samuel. Hi, welcome, Samuel.
Yeah, hi, thanks, Max. And hi, everybody. My name is Samuel. I'm based off in Singapore. I've been in the logistics supply chain domain for the last 20 plus years, across 3PL, brand names like Nike, Flextronics. Right now, I'm working for Lazada. I heads up the Lazada global fulfillment, essentially helping most sellers to come into Southeast Asia and do their fulfillment at a local basis. So thank you for having me.
Okay, great. Okay, so maybe I'd like to get started. Maybe a question actually that was not in one of the questions we prepared, but I wanted to actually bring it up to you guys because some countries are still going for it. Post-pandemic, what are the things that you have watched or changing in the last 2.5 years that we've been through that difficult time with pandemic? As you know, I'm in China where we are still living it. But what are some of the big changes maybe each of you can tell us one or two that you've seen happening in the last 2.5 to 3 years due to a pandemic when it comes to e-commerce and logistics. Anybody? Yeah, Thomas.
For us, the main point was just trying to stay open and keeping the customer promise. When you have a network business and you unfortunately have a COVID within your facility or one of your men, then it obviously has a massive impact to the entire network. Lucky enough, we could be slightly agile with having several locations, so that helped us to maintain the operations. And then certain trends like fresh and frozen delivery and food became very, very popular. So we were requested by the local government to deliver during the very hard lockdown. So we set up a cold chain logistics over a weekend to offer fresh delivery to people across Ho Chi Minh. And then we actually rolled that out throughout Vietnam. So now we have mini FCs around the major cities offering fast 1 hour fresh delivery and frozen. So it kind of had a knock-on effect afterwards of certain directions of companies and attention. But mainly the main point was keeping our staff safe and keep on going and keeping the customer promise.
That's interesting. Yeah. Sobit?
Yeah. So in whatever I've seen across the e-commerce industry, including the company where I'm working in Korea, one of the major changes I've seen is the companies focusing a lot on business continuity. Earlier, the business continuity plans were like some department working in low-key department working and making out those plans, whether it'll get executed or not depends on the situation. But then now we see a more focused business continuity in all the companies that I've ever interacted in e-commerce. That's one of the major changes I've seen. Every company is now prepared for the worst case in terms of COVID. So there are, for example, in Korea, we were required to close the facilities when there is even a single case detected. So that's how strict it was earlier. And hence, everyone needed to plan for that continuity. The demand and everything was secondary. It was definitely higher. The frozen, as Thomas pointed out, the frozen and fresh definitely spiked up. But then the companies, the change in terms of how company was operating happened really in the continuity plans that the companies have kind of prepared in this pandemic.
Okay, that's interesting. Samuel?
Yeah, I just want to echo what Thomas mentioned. If you're probably aware, like RedMart, one of Singapore's biggest online groceries, experienced a kind of tremendous growth over the last 2 to 3 years. For what pandemic being not a great thing for the world, but for a sector like e-commerce become a blessing in disguise. But yet at the same time, it poses such kind of operation challenges in terms of scaling. We are not talking about 10% incremental scaling during those last 2 years. The scale up is just tremendous. But the question left behind is right now post-COVID, like most of the other e-commerce company, we scale so much. Then the question is that how do we then sustain the scale up setup that we already have? So that is really going to be a challenging question that most of us guys, some of my friends here, will probably have the same question.
Yes.
Okay. Benjamin or Andre?
Yeah. So for us, So for us, what we've seen is one of the changes that brought about from the pandemic is a lot of adoption of last mile delivery. I mean, we have a mix of retail shops and last mile. So during the pandemic, we saw the increase for last mile increase exponentially. Some countries even double the percentage that we do last mile delivery. So this translates to a lot of increase in costs in warehousing, fulfillment, pick, pack, last mile. And now we are trying to balance the strategy in terms of our retail footwork, trying to change the functions of our shops to reduce the sizes, reduce rental, because overall we need to keep the cost of distribution equal or stable. Otherwise you'll eat into the profits. So we need to develop new capabilities. A lot of last mile providers during the pandemic showed that they were not capable to meet the KPI. So that's been one of the challenges for us to upgrade to better providers and to meet our next day delivery, fulfillment promise to our customers.
Okay, so you're not closing stores, but you are reducing the size of those physical stores, right? Overall.
So it takes a whole rethink of the strategy. So previously you might have like 80 stores or something in a particular country. You may reduce some, but you may also, we are also thinking of changing the functions of the shops. So instead of every shop having a buy and go kind of function, some may just be to be an exhibition center, some may be just gatherings for customers to bring in new customers, and we might reduce some functions. So overall to save some space.
Okay, interesting. Andre?
Yeah, some interesting points. But I think the main difference I've seen is when COVID started, and we tend to forget already this period, which was very interesting and hectic. I think it was very different for companies that are already built for online business and companies that are offline and had maybe online as a side gig almost. So I think it was a very different situation for the two. And of course, both of them need to sort of focus on how to serve the customers during the time, not just with touchless payments, touchless handing over the parcels and stuff. So it was really a huge challenge. And I think there's an interesting meme on the internet where the CEO of a company was asked who managed the innovation, who was kickstarting the innovation in your company, and the answer is COVID-19. So yeah, I think it was an interesting time. And maybe one addition, I've also seen, of course, the growth of the groceries category here in Thailand. So I think pre-COVID it was not a big category overall, but Thai consumers definitely got way more open to shop groceries, not just food delivery, but also actual groceries, and that's across the board from the wholesale stores to the convenience stores. Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so I want to remind again everybody that you guys can ask questions using the Q&A. So feel free to push your questions at any time, and we can take them as they come. All right, so the market in Asia has been dominated by some of the big players like the Lazada and the Shopee, but you also see a number of marketplaces which are more local, domestic players, which are fiercely competing with the big players. Do you think that the big platforms have an advantage against the local one, or it's the other way around when it comes to e-commerce, fulfillment, and delivery? Anybody? Andre?
Sure. Yeah, so it's an interesting question. I think what I mentioned before, the online first companies, sort of the marketplaces, they definitely have their own battle actually, regardless of COVID. So they're still fighting in most of the countries about who's the biggest and who will stay in the market. So I think that's something to consider when looking at that. So we still see extremely low commission charged to sellers on the marketplace, those kind of things. And that being said, of course, the logistic capabilities and the warehousing has to catch up. I think we are still far away from the Amazon model that's operated in Europe and the States and Australia. But I think we will get there within the next couple of years.
Okay, Thomas, you are part of one domestic platform which are fiercely competing against the giants. So Thomas, what's your take on this? Do you think that as a domestic player you have an advantage? Please make sure to unmute. Yeah,
I have to say yes, don't I? Really, but there are some,
of course,
there are some advantages of being a local player in a market like this, especially as big as Tiki, and as well as Tiki is competing in Vietnam, for example. It's not easy to do that, especially against the big guys like Lazadas and Shopees. However, the Vietnamese people are extremely patriotic and have a kind of distrust of foreign companies sometimes. So that can work to a local player's advantage quite a lot. For example, we sell Vietnamese goods for the Vietnamese people, and we're one of the most trusted. We are the most trusted online platform in Vietnam. So there are some advantages you can take to it, and also the advantages of having just the single country as well sometimes is that you can be a lot more flexible because you're making changes just for one country, and that doesn't have an impact across your entire network across countries sometimes. And there's a lot of very smart people, a lot smarter than me in Tiki office, engineering away every day to make changes instantly, if not straight away within 1 week or so. So yeah, there are some advantages of being a local player in a big pond.
So the solution you provide are very domestic Vietnamese focus, right?
Yes, correct.
And yeah, okay, that's interesting. So Bit, with Coupang in Korea, I think Coupang also operate in some other countries, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, there are a
mainly
couple
Korea.
of pilots that Coupang has started doing, but it's majorly in Korea. Like it's majorly focused for Korea. And what I would say in this particular case is like the big e-commerce companies do have that advantage of funding usually, right? That's the biggest advantage that they have. They can buy everything what they want, but then what they cannot buy, even with the people, what they would be able to hire is the flexibility that the local e-commerce companies do have. Local e-commerce companies are smaller. They are able to, I mean, comparatively smaller. They are bigger e-commerce companies as well. When we talk about the rest of the Asia as well, right? For example, in Coupang, it's already heavily funded. So I'm not gonna like talk about a comparison with Coupang, but I'm talking about the smaller companies which are not heavily funded, which have lack of funds. For example, in countries like India, where there are a lot of local intelligence that needs a local solution, which is more flexible when you're smaller, when you're more flexible to adopt those when you're a really smaller company. If you're that big, a lot of process changes. It would need a lot of churning across the whole company to bring a very small change. That is something that that's why the local e-commerce companies do get an advantage over the bigger e-commerce companies.
Okay, that's interesting. Samuel, give us the Lazada perspective on this thing.
This is not about David versus Goliath, right? But I think it's the old school thought, isn't it? Big has advantage and small has its nimbleness. And I think my friend outlined something that is so specific, right? When you are at that certain local scale, you do have distinct advantage being that size, that nimbleness, and that loyalty that you garner with the residents of the country. So I guess I speak on behalf of a bigger organization, a regional player like Lazada. I guess nothing to be too surprisingly is about scale. So especially in the e-commerce world, scale matters. Even if you are a local player, you will be constantly thinking about how to scale up because it's always about the cost per unit, how much you can bring the product at that kind of competitive pricing where consumer will just lap it up, right? So that is still continue to be the holy grail. And being size of Lazada or my friendly competitor, not so friendly competitor, Shopee, right? We are constantly talking about how do we scale up, how do we get more, how to get more, because fundamentally at the end, we're driving that kind of value to our consumer, our user of a platform. And that I think is quite distinct with regard to company like Lazada. But on the flip side, we do say that for local player, right, there are besides nimble, I also noticed that because they are local, there are also advantages, especially when there is government relationship that around them, helping them, fostering them. So we do see policy that are more favorable to local players. We have to accept that. Therefore, we are constantly trying to reinvent ourselves, finding creative logistic solution to get into the country in a proper way and still compete in a fair and square manner with the local players.
Okay, that makes sense. Benjamin, you are a merchant, a brand, a retailer. What's your take on this?
Yeah, so we are not a marketplace. I mean, we sell our own products and our own brand through the omni-channel logistics channel. So I think in terms of logistics distribution, I don't particularly see any difference between us and Amazon, for example. In fact, what's happening is that we are actually partnering with
Okay, Benjamin. I think we lost Benjamin. He's going to come back. Benjamin, are you with us? Okay, looks like we lost him. Hold on. Okay, maybe we move on to another topic while Benjamin is trying to figure out how to log in again. Let's bring up the other topic that we had. The question was, and I would like to ask you a bit, how do we balance service and cost in the e-commerce logistic world, especially in lower priority service like inbound? Yeah.
Hello. Sorry, I think I was disconnected.
Benjamin, you're back.
Yes,
okay,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. We lost you. Okay, go ahead again.
Yeah, so I think I was saying that Amway distributes our own products through our own through the omni-channel means, and we don't particularly see any big advantage or difference between us and the big players. In fact, I was saying that we do partner with a lot of the giant e-commerce players. We partner with Jingdong in China, who are actually distributing our products in China for us. We are also talking to, we had some discussions with people like Cainiao, who is the logistics arm of Alibaba. In fact, I think it's also with Lazada Logistics in other parts of Southeast Asia. So because we don't sell on the marketplace, we are able to leverage on the capabilities and scale of these huge e-commerce players, which is a win-win situation for us, so that we can focus on R&D and the quality of our products, whereas leveraging on some of the very established players like Lazada Logistics, Cainiao, Jingdong, who have put in a lot of investment. And it's the kind of investment that we probably shouldn't put in as well, because we are not a logistics player, but rather we are a retailer.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Before we lose you again, Benjamin, I want to continue asking you another question. What do you think are the key challenges faced by merchants when it comes to e-commerce logistics and distribution right now, this year? What would be your biggest issues or problems that you're facing?
Well, it's always about the service level, right? For us, depending on the country that we are in, we need to be market competitive. So if we are operating in the States or China, everyone expects next day delivery, same day delivery, 3 hours delivery. So we have to be partnering with the right partner that can give us this kind of service level. And of course, Southeast Asia, maybe, a place like Indonesia, it could be a bit different due to the geography of the country and all that. But first, we need to make sure that we meet market level service. Secondly, it will be the overall shopping experience. So nowadays, people are using the apps, Line, WhatsApp to get notification. And if we are giving a shopping experience without such notifications and track and trace, people may not be so keen to buy from us. So they want the notifications, they want it in their all-in-one app, they want it on apps that they are using and all that. So these are things that we need to look out for when we partner with the right people. And finally, it's the returns policy, reverse policy. Sometimes we need to ensure that they have an easy reverse logistics policy. If they want to return the goods, it must be convenient for the consumers. And pick-up, drop-off solutions like lockers, convenience store, petrol station. The more options we offer them, it will help to affect and improve their shopping experience.
Okay. Is cost an issue for you? Because we talked about it this morning with some of the speakers where e-commerce operation costs have been going up the roof, and it's becoming very difficult for brands to absorb it.
Yes, cost is definitely something that we must consider with priority. Let's say, service level is as equally important as cost. If someone can deliver for a fraction of the cost but takes about 10 days to get your parcel, it's not something that we want to consider. But it's very competitive today, right? You have your Cainiao, you have Jingdong, you have Amazon, and you have all the big 3PLs that are coming in with their integrated solutions. So these people can provide a reasonable service level with all the track and trace APIs that we need. Then among them, of course, we need to find the most reasonable cost, right? So that's why with the same service level that we can agree on, we do need to source and do some bidding for the best, most competitive cost. But having said that, we will invest whenever it's necessary. So like the integrations, the apps, if it's necessary, we will have to invest in them.
Okay, so then it brings me back to a question I was asking you, Sobit, on how do we balance service and cost in e-commerce logistics? Yeah, if you could comment on this. Yeah.
Sure. So I think everyone, all the e-commerce companies, whether it's marketplace or retail, all of them are always gunning. And in fact, the business is about cost efficiency, right? Everyone will be focused usually about cost efficiency, how you're performing against cost. Uh, for e-commerce companies, they also need to consider service, because that also is driving their revenue, right? And in most of the e-commerce companies that I've worked with or I've interacted with are usually too focused on the service part of it, and they kind of work with the cost backwards. Uh, while it's really important to maintain your cost, uh, while you're like working on your cost efficiency projects, it the way how I feel it should be balanced, and things like inbound, for example, that's a service where most of the e-commerce companies or most of the supply chains are not that heavily focused on, because that's not the direct revenue source for them. The way ideally I feel that they should be balancing is planning out well in advance in terms of their deciding the OKRs. Uh, this is one of the key things that I've learned recently, or I would say I've seen across the experience that I have, that when you're deciding your OKRs, you usually go very like optimistic in terms of your all of the other cost goals or service goals. But when you're deciding on your cost goals or your service goals, let's say, you don't have the guardrail of the other one. For example, if I'm working for improving the cost, then I lose the track of my service for that particular project. In all of the things that we are deciding, I think there should be an equal balance of service and cost in your OKRs, which you're going to execute, and make sure that we are keeping a track of it day in and day out. And that's how you will be able to like build in that balance within the culture of how you're operating.
Okay. What's your take, Thomas or Samuel, on that issue? Or Andrea as well. Feel free.
Yeah, let me quickly jump in. Yeah, I think it's interesting that we look at more the back office sides of the cost and what service do we want to offer, but it's also how much of the cost can you carry over to the customer and potentially seller if it's a marketplace. I think that's a very important point. I know from a marketing perspective, it's always better to offer free delivery or cheap delivery. But still, if you look at Amazon, most of the countries, the delivery cost is hidden, or the service cost is hidden in the product margin. Right? So I think that's another aspect to consider. Yes, cost structure on the logistics side and warehousing and all those things. But there's also the seller, if there's a seller, and the customer side.
Okay. Samuel?
And this has to change.
Yeah. Okay.
Customers are very
Thanks.
small in Asia.
Yeah. I echo the fact that consumer or buyer will always like to see the word FOC, free delivery, right? But the truth is that there's no free delivery in this world. It's just embedded somewhere. I think that's where lies, whether it's your marketplace or even you are a retailer yourself as a product seller. How do you then spread out that same cost over one item, two item, three item, 10 items? And those can be played out very nicely in a marketplace platform, right? Or even the traditional channel, putting promotion, pack of 3, pack of 5. At the end of the day, there will be a break-even point that some of these costs will be spread out so thin that it become very palatable against the margin that the company is trying to work on. So there's still a fair bit of creativity around that can skirt around a true cost, not no cost. And that's where I think each player, each company, each platform are trying to pit themselves against each other in the best possible manner.
Thomas?
Yeah, for me, I just agree with what the panelists have said already. There's no such thing as free shit, even though you hear it all the time. There are obviously many elements that you can work on in, day out to improve the cost, working on productivities, look to automation, for example. So there's various elements like that. Maybe automation is a little bit soon in Vietnam and within e-commerce, even though we've started, but full automation will come and it will inevitably be here, just like it is in China. But then also, I think while the basket value is quite small currently. People are unwilling to spend that $1 or $2 on delivery because it's basically 10% or 20% of the total value of the goods they're actually buying. So when the basket value goes up and people become quite more affluent, we'll be able to then pass on that cost onto those individuals. Like if they're buying a pair of Yeezys for $100, paying $1 or $2 for delivery, they're then willing to do it, right? So that's why I believe where the change will come, where we'll be able to recoup those costs and maybe pass on through, value within the value of the product or not. And I think also we have to start looking at it. I think the days of burning cash have gone. I don't think investors are willing to allow that to happen anymore. Therefore, we have to start seeing a trend towards profitability and turning the corner away from just getting endless amounts of money invested left, right, and center. So it will happen, but yet the consumer still wants that free ship all the time.
And given the inflation and all the issues that we're facing right now in Asia, do you think that those companies can become profitable even with the scale that they achieve? That's a big question, right?
Yeah, there's 3PLs in Vietnam that are profitable and doing well. They work a lot on the social seller side, dealing with that slightly higher margin delivery product. And then diversifying and working with the platforms as well, etc. Looking into fulfillment, using less costly drop-off points or pick-up points, for example. There's various many elements, and you can do it. It comes with a lot of volume, but like I said, it becomes trying to convince the consumer to actually start maybe paying for it or willing to pay for it, for especially the speedier delivery.
Okay. There's a question for you, Thomas. Maybe we'll stay with you, and let me bring this on screen. Mark is asking, you mentioned you needed to develop a network quickly. It sounds like you did this successfully. I wonder how you achieve this in such a short time while keeping the cost competitive and still delivering on the promise.
Yeah, it was just due to the market really, and the needs and the requirements of people. I was requested to set up 12 mini warehouses in the 3 major cities in Vietnam in 12 weeks, basically starting up dark stores offering 1-hour delivery. It was easier because we already had the system and the process and the people. So we were just making them a little bit smaller warehouses and speeding up the delivery. So from an actual process point of view, it wasn't very difficult. But anyone knows when you're trying to find a warehouse, it comes with a lot of legal review. If you're trying to do it quickly, it comes costly, and there's very limited what you would call quick commerce or Q-commerce warehousing in the major downtown city, especially in Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh. So we tried to look at various different ways of creating a warehouse. So we would use empty retail space. We used the port in the middle of the Ho Chi Minh City, some of the small warehouses there. We just tried to make anything into a warehouse and make it quick, but it worked. It just took a lot of hard work and a lot of boots on the ground, looking at various different mini warehouses across the major cities.
Okay, thank you. There's another interesting question that I want to bring to all of you, and maybe you guys can answer it. This is from Shandan, who's asking, will there be any downtrend in e-commerce in future since many countries open up, restrictions are easing up, multiple sales channels are opening up, and also physical outlets are mushrooming? What's your take on this? Any downtrends expected?
So I think talking to most players, there's already a slight downtrend, or at least not a continuation of the growth we have seen in COVID. I think what was very interesting was the public email from, I think, the Shopify CEO a couple of weeks ago, where he was arguing why he had to let go, I think, 10%, 5 to 10% of his employees, because basically the steep growth curve was not persisting once the COVID situation got better. So, and I think talking to a few players, big players in the region here, they sort of have a similar message. Yeah.
And when you say downtrend, are we talking about a drop of sales or just a slower growth?
Slower growth. There's still growth. I think if he was actually the CEO of Shopify was actually also showing a chart of growth, basically. So we sort of continue with the pre-COVID growth rate. We had a spike up during COVID, but we sort of land back at the curve that would sort of be the natural growth of e-commerce. So it's not really a downtrend. It's just back to the level of growth that is more natural, I would say. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Samuel, maybe?
Yeah. So this is just most recently we have our seller conference and our CEO presented a couple of slides. And obviously from 2020 to 21, we have a high double-digit growth, not Lazada, but generally as an e-commerce market in Southeast Asia. But when it comes to 21 to 22, we do see still double-digit, but much lower in terms of the overall market. And I think definitely we wouldn't have to second guess the post-pandemic development, which is good for the world, as a downside for the overall e-commerce economies. It's natural because the shops are filling up again. People want to go out, and therefore there will be a shifting of that similar buying power. Used to be all so focused on e-commerce because they are just staying at home, but right now the same bucket of buying power is spread. And more so, we definitely see is going back to normalcy, whereby people do go up and shop and dine, and therefore there will be less buying power with regard to buying all sort of things that be online. So I think from a Lazada perspective, we got to look at this trend and pivot ourselves, right? It's not that the market is gone, but the market becomes selective. So there goes again, where should we head in terms of our assortment choice, the programs that we're going to run about, apart from the standard e-commerce playbook of commission play, low cost, to grow further exponentially, that wouldn't cut it. I think we have to go beyond that and look into the consumer taste, what do they really want, what assortment they want, what kind of quality and style that they want, and thereby, right, may also changes the landscape with regard to low-cost logistics. As people get a little bit more affluent, get a bit more matured, it's been 10 years e-commerce history. I think people do mature along the way and see things and look at it differently.
Makes sense. Yeah. Benjamin, is that something you also observed with your own sales?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, during the pandemic, we saw a boom, a rapid growth of e-commerce adoption. A lot of people buying online, because that was basically the only channel that they could use during those 2 years. And as with everyone, we see a slowing down in terms of the e-commerce channel for delivery. So in the past, we probably doubled our home delivery. And then today we see that it's slowing down slightly, right? And I think that's as what Samuel mentioned, because everywhere is opening up, people have the option now to buy from shops and they are using this option. So this is normal. However, I think we still need to maintain the service level that we have provided in the past. So we've done all this investment, upgraded our service options and the IT systems and all that. But even though now that the trend is slightly slowing down, we cannot take back all these investments because we still need to compete with the kind of service that everyone has gotten used to, right? But we also need to think about other channels, like the retail channels, which are again, a viable option for consumers. So, it's become more competitive, more challenging for us because it's no longer just focused on e-commerce, but we need to focus on the overall landscape, a combination of retail options, a good e-commerce offering, and good after sales and reverse logistics in order to maintain our customer base.
Yeah. Thomas, is that something also you see happening in Vietnam?
Yeah, very similar. And again, I agree with what the panelists have said, but more to the point of maybe the future of e-commerce. You just have to look. Amazon was around before COVID and massive. Alibaba was around before COVID and massive. They went from 0% of total retail to 50% of e-commerce for total retail over 20 years. At the moment, e-commerce in Vietnam is only around 5% of total retail. So you can honestly see that there's still massive opportunity for growth in Vietnam and other Southeast Asian countries, and it will replicate what we see in other countries like China, but it will not take us 20 years. It will be exponentially quicker than that, and so there's still loads of potential here. Even even after COVID.
Okay, we got another question I want to bring on screen to all of you. How do you manage your online and social media presence? And how do you use this information to develop new markets or challenge existing market leaders? More general question, so be it, maybe, or yeah.
Yeah. So essentially, we are talking about the e-commerce market where your social media presence and your online presence is equally important, right? So I think this is something social, like for example, social media e-commerce, or there are trends which are changing, right? There are companies which are now investing more to that. It's still very early stages there, but I think the opportunity still does exist, and uh, the market leaders which are currently driving the whole e-commerce need to also realize this market was also like existing, like the social media e-commerce is something which is very new, it's very nascent, it's still at an early stage of adoption, and I think we still are a bit far to kind of assess whether it's something which will sustain and which will grow at the similar pace which how the normal online e-commerce went or not.
Okay. All right, maybe I'll bring up that question. That's a question for you, Andre. How does last mile impact the customer perception of a seller of a marketplace, or is lowest cost of delivery more important?
Yeah, so I think we answered this question partially already, but so when we talk about anyone who's selling online, especially internally, marketing teams tend to focus on the online presence and those kind of things, social media presence. What kind of banners do you put up? What kind of promotions? But I think what is one of the top three marketing aspects is what is the last mile delivery experience. It's not just speed, but it's also how do you package the product, those kind of things. So I think it's more important to focus on the last mile experience than the sort of online presence initially. Yeah.
Okay, and there's a question which actually relate to this from Erica, who's asking, what do you think is the best way to maintain a positive customer experience? Yeah, so you will say last mile.
It's a very complex question actually, because it's consisting of many different aspects. But yeah, I think logistics in e-commerce plays the most important part, including the last mile, because the more smooth the experience is, the less the customer has to try to contact someone or to even post a negative review. So I think it's the number one part to smoothen the experience.
Okay. Anybody else on this?
Max,
Samuel?
maybe I could add a point to that. Regard to last mile experience, it's true because most seller, in fact, majority of the platform seller, right, never seen a customer before. And the customer do not know who they are. They only know the products. The touch point, the real physical touch point is really last mile. But yet within that, right, we got to really segregate the different bands of products we're talking about. If you're just going to buy a phone case, that's going to cost you $3 The last mile delivery experience, as long as the product reach the door, safe and sound, the right product, A-OK, right? You don't really even, for most consumer, they need to talk to the last mile delivery person. But if you start to talk about products like white goods, for example, you buy a fridge, they're required to move the product into your kitchen, plug it on for you, turn it on, and show that it is working, wipe it down clean, and that is a completely different experience altogether. I have this example that was related to me once by a white good company. They sent this really expensive, like maybe 3,000 Sing dollar fridge, really high end. So everything was plugged in and everything, and then the guy left, and then the brand company got a review on the website. Not about the product. It's about the last mile guy who left a dirty towel at the owner's kitchen, and that's it. It was meant to be a 5-star, right? If it's a 3,000 plus a fridge, but end up being a 1-star because that particular one encounter. So you can see the impact is really different and got to be product segregation, but yet the experience perhaps has to be addressed for certain categories of goods we're talking about here.
Very nice
Okay.
example.
Yeah. Benjamin, Sobit, what's your take on this? Or Thomas, maybe? Yeah, Benjamin.
Yeah, sure. So positive customer experience for us, it goes from the order, fulfill, and deliver the stages, right? So I think for us, every stage is important. So I'm not sure if you might be aware, but our products from Amway are maybe slightly more expensive. So we have vitamins, we have beauty products. So some of them, they do insist on certain service level. So for example, in Hong Kong, when we do our last mile delivery, the delivery person will need to open up the case and do a checklist one by one to ensure that every item is delivered. It's the kind of service that we provide to the consumer to differentiate ourselves from other companies. So in terms of once the order is placed, how soon the order is out, and how it's being delivered, everything is important to us. And therefore we need to partner with the right partners that can provide this service, right? And also in terms of the kind of options that we offer, like the pickup, drop off, the reverse logistics, and the after sales service, because we sell some durable products like water and air purifier. So the service, if they call a contact center, the next day a serviceman is over there to repair the product, and do we provide a free repair and all that. So these are all important things for us.
Okay, good. Sobit?
Yeah,
Thomas?
so on this point, like a part of it is already covered in the discussions that we have had, right? Now, it majorly boils down to the trust that you're building onto your customer, right? The experience is more about the trust than anything else, because most of the e-commerce companies are very similar into their policies, which they are having, right? The return policy, most of it is very, very similar, almost similar. But now it mostly boils down to the trust, how you're building it within your customers, whether you are serving the customers right at the time when they are like requesting, how is your lead time around that, how are your policies built towards trusting or towards building that trust. Last mile is definitely very important, because that is something where your first time interacting to the customers, but then the whole buying experience, the return experience, everything has to be circumferring around the trust factor, whether you're building or enhancing that trust or keeping that trust or not.
Thomas?
Yeah, like the guy said, basically it's that moment of truth, isn't it? It's the point where the consumer actually meets someone face to face. So it's really, that's the most important part to ensure that happens. But the important part of that is also to keep your promise to be on time. And as Benjamin said, you have to look at every single touch point throughout the whole chain, from pick, pack to sort to delivery as well, to ensure you keep that promise. Because once you break that promise, you kind of have a distrust again of your platform. It can be the right color, it can be the right product, it can be the right amount, but then if it's late, it's something I believe is unacceptable and has a very negative impact on the whole customer experience.
Okay, just so we have a few more minutes before we wrap up this discussion. I wanted to ask you a question about technology, because we cannot speak about e-commerce logistics without talking about automation, robotics, technology. We've seen dozens of startups popping up in the last few years, focusing on last mile, focusing on warehouse automations. Some of them very well funded, growing in Asia. Some of them are domestic companies. Some of them more regional already. Some of them come from the West. What's your take on all those companies kind of embracing the space? Some of them are also trying to replace, the typical traditional 3PLs. Some of them are also changing the way you run a warehouse. So what is your take on this? And do you have any companies that you are really excited about that you can name and mention to the audience here? Anybody would like to start?
Maybe I start then. So I think it's a motivation for the existing players to look at least to see if there are any learnings they can take, anything that they don't offer currently, whether it's optimization and just efficiency and cost, or it's a service level topic. So some startups are born out of this innovation thinking, but also some startups are born out of just right away taking market share. We've seen some of the Chinese sort of sponsored or Chinese investment 3PLs that don't really work with much innovation. Of course, it's still a level of innovation, but it's not the main goal. And there, the goal is to take market share. I think we have to see the two differences in what's the purpose of the company. Yeah, so I think it's a motivation for existing players to
definitely to move and change. Yeah, maybe Benjamin, have you seen any companies that you are really excited about coming from the log tech startups in Asia?
I'm sorry, I think I was disconnected again, so I couldn't get the whole question earlier. So I think you're asking about technology used in the last mile, right?
In general, in e-commerce, and if you've seen any interesting startups really, changing and providing some very exciting solutions in the market.
Yeah, in fact, one of our suppliers in Singapore is a startup, so he's our warehousing provider. And one of the reasons why we are using that is because of the amount of innovation and technology they put into the warehouse. So it's a Swiss log automation technology, so it's completely without human intervention. So everything is fully automated. And it's very exciting to see this kind of technology in a startup company. I think the company is less than 10 years old, but they are already doing for multiple small sellers. I think they're also doing some of the work for platforms and all that. And now they're doing work for Amway as well.
And what's the name of the company? You can name them?
Yeah, they are Blue Logistics, Blue e-commerce.
Yes.
So they are warehousing provider.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have seen the productivity hit above the high 90s, I think in 97, 98, 99, ever since we moved and started using them. So previously we were on a manual pick pack solution, using the shelves and taking the order list and doing it manually. But today with the goods to man technology that they use with the Swiss log automation, we see the productivity very constant. So whether it's because we have peaks at every month, and so whether it's the middle of the month where it's slack and peak at the end of the month, the productivity is maintaining at the highs of 98, 99. So I think that's one difference of automation. So in terms of scalability, it's so easy to scale up, scale down whenever we have automation. So whether it's a campaign, whether it's end of month peak, you don't need to have the headache of finding part-time workers, training them, teaching them, and having the uncertainty.
Okay. Interesting. Samuel, outside the partners of Lazada, have you seen anything exciting?
To be very honest, I don't. I've seen a lot of automation being deployed, but they are not out of the world. I mean, they are really fully automated running machines and stuff like that being portrayed as high productivity gainers, and true indeed it is. But yet itself has to be applied to very specific country, even specific industry. So to me, I don't see really that an answer called automation will be solve it all for every single aspect of our logistic challenge today. So I think in Lazada world, we have both automation and really quite manual operation. And we don't really think that the automation is much more superior than the manual. When you start to put in all the numbers together, when the finances, the productivity, the cost of labor, the cost of land, when you put them together, they are not exactly, the automation itself not exactly far superior that every single country in the world you should deploy automation. So I'm not a big believer of that. I think you got to deploy it where it applies. And especially in the e-commerce marketplace ourselves, we go through trough and valley, right? BAU versus campaign. You can't build an automation based on campaign, right? Because during BAU, you'll be suffering from depreciation. So at the end of the day, we do recognize its strength, but we must recognize that we need to find that nice balance and hybrid combination to make sense for our world.
Okay. All right. So be it. Thomas?
Yeah. So I've heard a lot about like the technologies which are helping dark stores in the warehousing industry, and there are a lot there, and we've been seeing it for the past few years as well. But one specific technology that I've like I'm looking forward towards is, and that's not like something which is which we have which I would have seen, I would have thought that I would see so near a time, right? Is the bots in logistics. I've started seeing Korean government investing a lot onto the bots. Now, one of the things which we are expecting to see in the near future, maybe a year or somewhere in the year or so, that delivery happening through bots in parks. That's something that I've always thought that I would see when I'll get really old, many years from now. But that's something that's real now. That's really exciting for me.
Okay, Thomas.
Yeah, for me, if you want a startup company that's invested in innovation and technology, then Tiki is your one. We have some robots that we implemented for our pick and pack in our facility in the south last year, and it worked very well. It's very high productivity. It's running consistently. But then I have to agree with what Samuel says. Automation is not always the answer, especially within a country like Vietnam or in Southeast Asia. I've seen a lot of people run to that as the holy grail and spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on a nice sortation center in a very high-end industrial park, and then it never gets to the numbers that they want due to the nuances of packages, etc., within Vietnam, or just e-commerce network as well, right? So I have to agree with Samuel that yes, automation will obviously happen. We will see drones and whatever in the future, but at the moment you really have to be careful not to run and think it's the only way of delivering a quality service. And sometimes it's not as good as just the kids on the floor that are doing the job right now.
Absolutely. And again, I'm sitting in China. I can tell you that the Chinese warehouse don't look always like the one you see on YouTube videos with all those robots. Even in China, there's a lot of people packing stuff manually. And those robots that you see online usually are for the PR, for the show,
very good
just to show that, exactly, for the companies to show that they're investing into technology, but they are not always used the way that they are saying they're being used. Anyway, thank you guys. I appreciate your time. This is the end of our panel discussion for e-commerce logistics Asia 2022. I appreciate again that you're taking your time. Thanks, Andre. Thanks, Thomas, Subit, Samuel, and Benjamin for joining us. I want to remind everybody that our next speaker is actually on standby, ready to go. So if you still have time to watch and listen to our session, we have a few more speakers coming up after this panel. Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.